And I want to talk about something called liquid democracy. This is a different way to think about the voting mechanism that might make more sense in a future where we might want to delegate our vote to something smarter than ourselves. So imagine a world where a highly intelligent artificial intelligence actually works on the behalf of citizens as a whole, people like you. Now, if we combine that with a concept that's called liquid democracy, it might actually work. So this innovative approach, liquid democracy, is when you can take your vote and say, hey, this person I know is much smarter at certain aspects of like voting than I am. Maybe they're better with environmental, or they're better when it comes to like how to handle the fire department. So you say, if it's about the fire department, you can vote for me. But for this person, if it's about the environment, you can vote for me. So you maintain control over your vote, but you can delegate it out to people that you think are smarter. And at any time you don't want to delegate it anymore, you can bring it back home. And the reason why a system like this might make sense is because artificial intelligence might be incredibly good at some things, maybe some things that aren't very emotional or very human, that the government just needs to get done, like how to budget or something that's just very like logistical. But when it comes to something more personal, like gun rights or abortion, you might want to just hold that one close to you because that's tied into your personality, your sense of self. Anyways, I like the idea because it gives us more control over the future, and it also kind of brings in that role, put an AI in place of a citizen in just certain situations, so you can kind of play with it. If you didn't like the way it voted, you still have control to take it back and vote a different way, but it can start being something that over time you can trust in different aspects of how citizens vote for their government. So there's a couple ideas about how artificial intelligence might represent the citizens, but it can also be something that could very much hurt us. So let me explore that side now. So there's a couple arguments for how I could see artificial intelligence empowering the citizens to help make the government and the citizen relationship better. But artificial intelligence is also really good at manipulating us. It can spread misinformation. So now let's look at the other side of that coin and talk about how it actually can be a threat to democracy. So futurist and NYU professor Amy Webb cautions that the growth of artificial intelligence is heading down a perilous path, which will eventually impact your life. So take the Facebook anti-vaxxer controversy for an example. Now, she said the problem was that our comprehension about what free speech is wasn't keeping up with the actual technology that was making the vaccines. So the people who did have a free speech to point out that it doesn't work also didn't know how to reference the right information about whether it worked or not. Now, Webb does believe that there's a way for a Western democracy to kind of integrate an artificial intelligence in a good way, but she's afraid that it might take some big catastrophe before it happens. And she's also worried that we're just not acting quick enough and taking it as seriously as we should. For example, other countries are getting more data collected from their citizens, and they're using it in ways that just don't require the same kind of permissions. And what if that leads to the government having a super powerful AI that knows so much about its citizens it's easy to influence them? So to mitigate this threat, Webb believes that we need to create a global organization called the Global Alliance on Intelligence Augmentation. And she thinks the goal of this organization should be to establish a worldwide norms, a set of standards that will urge individuals to treat these problems with the seriousness that they deserve. So as a thought experiment, let's assume Webb is right and we act too slow, and authoritarian leaders get control of the most powerful AIs first. Now, nations always live with this strange equilibrium where you kind of like push someone a little bit, but they push back to show that they're not weak, but they don't really want to go too far because you don't really want to start a war and have like really bad consequences. You want to keep commerce going all the time because everybody loves economic growth and everybody wants better healthcare. So you have all these sort of things that are pushing and pulling at each other, and they seem to mostly balance out. But that equation is going to change really rapidly, even if it's not for nefarious reasons, because technology is going to make weapons so much more powerful. Robots and automation, like self-driving cars, are going to completely change the way that outsourcing works. The relationship that comes from having a product built in another country and then shipped back home, or vice versa. And at the same time, technologies to do that are going to become much more powerful. So ChatGPT doesn't connect to something like the internet yet, so it can't post on Facebook automatically, but a whole new crop of auto GPTs are popping up, and they will have that ability. And whether you publicly give up your data or not, these things are going to become so smart that even like anonymous signals that you leave on the internet will eventually be traced back to you. But during a time of crisis, people kind of lean lean into that authoritarian thinking, and if they have all of the data and it feels like we need to give that up as someone who sacrifices privacy for the ability to be protected, we just have to be careful. It's a slippery slope. There's already a disconnect for politicians who don't feel like they truly have to pay the consequences when they make decisions that aren't in the best interest of the citizens. And that's something that's been talked about recently in the news by Elon Musk. In fact, you might have heard about a new large language model he wants to create, something to compete with ChatGPT called TruthGPT. But should we trust his intentions to really bring us the truth? I'm questioning that. So large language models are absolutely going to play a huge role in disinformation. And to build a system that is, I don't know if it's unbiased or if he wants to be biased in a way that balances out the bias that he sees in the other system, but no matter how you cut it, I just don't think TruthGPT should be named that or should be thought of that way. Because you want to explain to citizens that there is a bias in all systems in the same way people are going to have bias and that they need a critical eye. Take everything with a grain of salt that comes out of these kind of systems. Because it might be biased because it fed data in that was biased on accident or on purpose. It might be manipulated in some way. Citizens might try to feed it or give it kind of cues that it's doing the wrong thing, even though it's actually trying to be as honest as possible, and then it moves it in another direction. And if someone like Elon Musk is going to train it on Twitter data, I can't think of anything that's more polarizing. You're probably just going to get a super polarized large language model. And in a previous video, I actually showed a study that was talking about how what happens politically as these systems become more advanced is it just tells everybody what they want to hear. Like people that want it to be more liberal are queuing it and getting much more liberal responses. People who want more conservative responses are queuing it and getting that. It's just feeding people what it thinks they want. And if they're downvoting and upvoting different outputs, then it's just learning to tell them what they want to hear. It's building two echo chambers. So although Elon might be truthfully wanting an unbiased TruthGPT, I think that's a pretty tall order and something you shouldn't promise. Something you can strive for, but not something you should build and say you've got. And also, just somebody who watches this industry a lot, I can tell it's very personal with OpenAI. Like, he created that company and he pulled an investment and let somebody else become CEO because they wouldn't let him become the CEO of the company, including Sam Altman. And then he started attacking Sam, and Sam doesn't seem like he wants to fight back, and the whole thing kind of reeks of jealousy. All right, so jumping back to the government, let's say that they have facial recognition on all the citizens. How should we even start the debate about where that can be used for what kind of policing, when, where, and why? So way back in 1791, a man named Jeremy Bentham conceptualized a prison that he called the Panopticon. And it was designed so that one guard could watch all of the inmates in the prison without them knowing when he was looking. Now, if you fast forward to today, what it's like when we have recognition systems that can see a face, identify who the person is, and give that cue to someone is basically the same thing. It's a modern day panopticon. And it raises similar questions about privacy and surveillance. I mean, certainly it seems valuable to have camera systems so that we can see when a criminal does something, identify who it is, and go arrest that person so that we can have safer streets. And it's a godsend when it's used to locate missing children. And big data patterns have been good at finding some types of criminals and some kind of people who were doing really bad things before they did it. But some argue that the critical thing that we should be thinking about of a society isn't necessarily from a privacy point of view, like what can they have of my data, when, and how. The better way might be to kind of assume that the data can be out there, but there's reasonable expectations for where it is, when it should be deleted, who has access at what time, and how it's actually used in the broader context to find patterns. How do we guarantee that a face that is tracked and identified is only given to the right kind of person, the kind of person that's using it to track down a criminal or to solve a crime, but not somebody for any other reason? There could be some transparency in the software or the artificial intelligence that's making those decisions, and that might make us feel more comfortable with it overall. The G7 does have a few thoughts on artificial intelligence I want to talk about now. So you might be interested to learn that the G7 ministers, the digital ministers, are working on an artificial intelligence administration plan right now. And the result of this isn't just about me and you, it's about all of the G7 countries. This is a huge chunk of the entire world. And although it's starting to expand, it was kind of birthed out of data breaches. That was kind of the big digital problem that the digital ministers had sort of started this conversation about. And it's grown to incorporate misinformation, and now the beginning of what it would mean to have auto GPTs, artificial intelligence systems that are outside of their control but inside of different countries making decisions. Now, so far far they've talked about regulation from a really high level point of view. So talking about a watchdog group, a group that can go in and sort of police and check on the big tech companies around the world. But when they meet in fall of 2023, these artificial intelligence breakthroughs that have happened since the last time they met are going to be at the top of the agenda. All right, so let's finish up this video by talking about the White House. The Joe Biden White House has actually issued a digital artificial intelligence bill of rights, and it's on whitehouse.org. So I haven't actually heard anyone talk about this before, but I came across in my research a page on whitehouse.org that was issued by Joe Biden that is an artificial intelligence bill of rights. So in a nutshell, it says that as citizens, we deserve protection from shady digital business practices. Systems that collect that data from us need to ask us for that permission, and they need to use it in a way that's genuinely necessary, whatever business they're doing. So if they don't have a business need for collecting the data that they can justify in a court of law, even if they ask us and we consent to it, that can still be illegal. And I did not know that, and I find it refreshing actually. I think that's a smart way to go about it. So it also specifies that there should be extra safeguards for really sensitive information, which it also outlines as health, education, and employment information. And it even specifies that there should be more of a freedom from surveillance when it comes to 3 specific places: school, work, and home. They also said that if a computer makes a decision about you, you have the right to know why it made that decision, which of course with artificial intelligence is like a black box a lot of times, and these neural networks just make decisions without ever telling you, so don't even know how that could be enforceable or if that would stop people from using AI, but whatever, at least they tried. And it goes on to specify that if you don't know how a digital decision was made, you should be able to ask a real human who can help you, which would be great. But do a lot of people even know that we have a digital AI Bill of Rights on whitehouse.org? I haven't heard that. So I want to end with a joke, but honestly this video was like really hard to research, and I'm just happy that there's something going on that I can leave on a good note. So I'm just happy that we have an AI Bill of Rights. It's something to build off of.